My name is Jenna Grace Holloway, and the day I made my father eat his words in front of 200 wedding guests was the day I finally claimed my worth. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just stood tall while the screen behind me lit up with the footage of me carrying a stranger out of a burning building, my arms blistered and raw. And when my father dropped his champagne glass, too stunned to breathe, I finally looked him in the eye and said, "It always was me, you just never looked hard enough." Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. Because if you've ever been told you're not enough, this one's for you. It started in our Ohio farmhouse kitchen on a sticky July morning, the kind where you could hear the cicadas before you even opened the window. The linoleum under my bare feet was warm, and I still had sleep lines across my cheek when I laid my folded application on the table. My father, Rick Holloway, sat there with his usual black coffee, reading the sports section like it was gospel. His denim shirt had a smudge of grease on the collar, and the moment he saw the envelope, he gave me that look, half smirk, half challenge. "What's this?" he asked, sliding it toward him without even finishing his eggs. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Application to McAllister Military Academy. Their fall intake's still open. He stared at the paper like it had personally insulted him. "You serious?" "I've been training for months," I said. "They have a leadership program, physical fitness, discipline. For boys, Jenna, you think they're gonna put a ribbon on a rifle and hand it to you?" His laugh was loud, sharp, mocking. "That's no place for a girl, you'll just embarrass yourself." It was like he'd slapped me, but instead of crying, I felt something click into place. I stood straighter, my fists clenched at my sides. "Then I'll embarrass you with honor." He paused, his smirk faltering. My voice had carried, louder than I meant it to. Upstairs, I could hear the TV flicker off, my brother Caleb's doing, no doubt. He knew how this kitchen sounded when it turned into a battlefield. I glanced at my mother, Maria. She was over by the sink, hands in the soapy water, her mouth pressed in a hard line. She didn't look at me. She never did when he talked to me like that. Dad scoffed and pushed the application back toward me. "You think you're tough because you do a few push-ups in the barn. They'll chew you up and spit you out in that place." "I can take it," I said, voice firm. "You can't even take criticism," he shot back, jabbing his finger toward me. "You're 17, Jenna. This isn't some after-school club, it's real danger, real men, real stakes." That was the problem with my father. He measured everything by how real it was in his world. And a girl wanting to be more than a farmer's daughter, that wasn't real to him. It was just noise. I stepped forward and snatched the application off the table. "No, what's real is how scared you are that I might actually do it, that I might be more than the daughter who keeps quiet and cooks breakfast." "Watch your tone," he barked, but I didn't flinch. "Why, so you can respect me more." My laugh came out shaky but defiant. "You never wanted a daughter who could fight, did you? You wanted one who'd fold laundry and disappear." I turned and stormed out before he could reply. My sneakers slapped against the hardwood, the back door slamming shut behind me with a satisfying crack. Outside, the heat hit me like a wall, but I didn't care. I stomped across the field behind the house, toward the old barn that had become my personal training ground. Pull-ups on the rafters, sprints between the fence posts, push-ups in the hay. I worked out until sweat blurred my vision and my arms shook. Later that night, I sat on the back porch alone, legs aching, a bruise blooming on my elbow from where I'd missed a grip. The moon was fat and bright, casting silver over the cornfields. My mom stepped out, drying her hands with a towel. "I heard you too," she said quietly. I didn't respond. She sat beside me, close but not touching. "Your father's old-fashioned." I looked at her. "That's not old-fashioned, that's cruel." She hesitated, then nodded barely. "Just. Don't lose yourself trying to prove something to him." "I'm not," I said. "I'm trying to prove it to myself." She opened her mouth to say something else but didn't. Instead, she stood, left the towel on the railing and went back inside. I stared at the stars, thinking how the sky looked limitless, how somewhere out there, someone like me had already made it. And if they could, so could I, but right now, all I had was a bruised elbow, an unmailed application, and a father who laughed at the idea of his daughter in uniform. Still, I wasn't backing down. The window in our cramped Cincinnati dorm didn't open all the way, but it let in just enough breeze to stir the corners of my notes. The city sounded alive out there, car horns, distant sirens, laughter from students echoing off the buildings. But I was miles deep in a textbook on thoracic trauma. Not the path I'd originally chosen, but one I'd carved out of the same grit. I leaned back, rubbed my eyes, and reached for the notebook on the edge of my desk. The leather-bound one, my quiet place. On the first page, in my own handwriting, were the words, "Discipline is freedom, pain is proof, honor is silent." My own personal motto. I didn't need applause. I just needed to finish what I started. A knock on our door broke my focus. Elise peeked her head in, holding 2 mugs. Peace offering. "It's the extra strong stuff from the law floor." I smiled. "You're an angel." She handed me a steaming cup and flopped onto her bed across from mine, her curly brown hair piled in a bun that was collapsing by the minute. "You've been at that for 4 hours straight. Did you eat?" I shrugged. "Half a protein bar." "That's not food, Jenna, that's punishment." She sipped her coffee. "What is it tonight, cardiology or blood and guts?" "Thoracic emergencies," I said, flipping a page. "Collapsed lungs." "Chest tubes, light reading." Elise gave me a look. Normal people relax at 10 p.m. on a Thursday." "I'm not trying to be normal," I said quietly. She didn't push back. That's what I liked about Elise. She knew when to tease and when to respect the quiet. After a moment she asked, "Do you ever miss the military thing?" I glanced at her. "Every day." She nodded like she understood. "Then why switch?" I hesitated, choosing my words. "Because I realized. Saving people doesn't only happen in combat. Sometimes it's in a white coat. Sometimes it's in an ER with no weapons, just your hands and your brain." Elise stared at me a beat longer, then grinned. "You're gonna make one hell of a doctor, Jenna." I didn't respond. Just sipped the coffee and let the warmth fill the space where doubt usually lived. A photo on my desk caught my eye, me and Caleb at our high school graduation. He with his goofy grin and future all lined up at Ohio State. Me in my cap and gown with a smile that barely reached my eyes. "He called me last week," said Dad, still rolled his eyes whenever my name came up. Said Mom pretended not to notice. I guess they were still waiting for me to figure myself out. Fine. Let them wait. While they whispered, I was studying until my fingers cramped. While they mocked, I was shadowing trauma surgeons, asking questions, soaking in every ounce of knowledge I could. I didn't need them to believe in me. I just needed me. "You ever think about quitting?" Elise asked suddenly. I looked up. "Only when I blinked too long." We both laughed. Outside, a siren wailed down Vine Street, sharp and fast. My chest tightened, not in fear but in something deeper, a hunger. "I want to be where it matters," I said. Elise tilted her head. "You are." Maybe she was right. Maybe this was my battlefield. And my war wasn't with bullets, it was with seconds, pulses, and decisions that couldn't be taken back. I closed the textbook and finally let my shoulders fall. "I'll grab real food," I said. "And then maybe sleep for 4 hours." "Now we're talking," Elise smirked. "Medical miracles." As I slipped on my hoodie, I glanced at the old envelope tucked inside my notebook, the military academy application I never sent. I kept it as a reminder, not of what I didn't do, but of everything I still could. I hadn't planned on coming home, not right away. But 6 months after graduation, when the last of my savings dried up, and every job I applied for ghosted me or sent polite rejection emails that all read the same, I found myself back in that familiar gravel driveway. The tires crackled like they were judging me, too. The old farmhouse looked smaller than I remembered. The paint still peeled near the windows, and the porch light flickered with that same haunted buzz. Caleb's car was in the barn now. He'd moved into an apartment in Cleveland after getting hired by an architecture firm. Mom said he'd barely been home since. I stepped inside with 2 bags and a box of books I couldn't quite part with. "Jenna," my mother peeked around the corner from the laundry room. She wiped her hands on her apron and gave me a tight-lipped smile. "Your room's made up. Sheets are fresh. I wasn't sure if you were staying the night or—" "Just for a little while," I said quickly, hoping she wouldn't ask for specifics I didn't have. "Till I get something lined up." She nodded, eyes soft but cautious. "Dinner's in an hour, your father's out in the shed." I braced myself. That night I sat at the old kitchen table, same faded floral tablecloth, same dent in the leg that made it wobble if you leaned the wrong way. The smell of roast chicken and cornbread filled the room, comforting in a way that annoyed me. Rick Holloway walked in like a man who'd built the floorboards with his own hands. His boots thudded against the tile. He saw me and froze for just a moment, then gave a dry, amused smile. "Well, look what the diploma dragged in." I forced a polite smile. "Hi, Dad." He sat down, grabbed a roll from the basket and said, "Guess all those books didn't teach you how to get hired, huh?" My mother glanced at me quickly but didn't speak, just ladled mashed potatoes onto his plate. I've had interviews, I said, keeping my voice level. It's just competitive. A lot of grads are, he cut in, chewing. All them years, all that money, you'd think someone be eager to snatch up a Holloway girl with all that fancy education. I stabbed at my chicken but didn't lift my fork. Still got that fire in you? He asked with a raised brow. Or did med school knock the wind out? I'm not giving up if that's what you're asking, he snorted. Didn't think you were, just. Maybe next time, pick something that actually hires people. Dad, Mom said gently, her voice soft but warning, but he wasn't done. You know, he said, pointing his fork at me like it was a lecture pointer, you used to talk about the military like it was gospel. Then it was medicine, now it's what, waiting tables, temp jobs. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks but I refused to let it show. Not here, not to him. Sometimes it takes time, I said. Doesn't mean I've failed. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. A soldier or a surgeon seems like neither worked out. Silence pressed down hard. I chewed my bite slowly, counted to 5 in my head and swallowed it like a bitter pill. My mother cleared her throat. Jenna made the dean's list every year, and her professors wrote her glowing letters of recommendation. Dad shrugged. Glowing don't pay the bills. I wanted to scream, to hurl every sleepless night and every patient I shadowed and every exhausted hour in the anatomy lab back at him. But I didn't. I folded my napkin instead. That was the thing about my father, he didn't need fists to bruise, just words perfectly timed and sharpened like blades. After dinner, I helped with the dishes. My mom worked quietly beside me, rinsing and stacking. At one point she said softly, "He doesn't mean to be cruel." I didn't respond. Because maybe he did mean to. Or maybe he just didn't care enough to know the difference. Later, in my childhood bedroom with the creaky mattress and peeling wallpaper, I sat at the edge of the bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me. I was 26. I had a degree, a resume, and no place to be in the morning. But even in that moment, surrounded by the quiet defeat of returning to square one, I could still feel it. That little ember inside. He could mock it. He could smother it with doubt. But he couldn't kill it. I wasn't done. The rented room was barely wider than my wingspan. One narrow bed, a dented desk, and a radiator that hissed like it held a personal grudge against winter. The walls were blank except for a taped-up photo of me and Elise from graduation, caps crooked, eyes hopeful. That version of me had no idea how hard the world could press its palm against your chest and dare you to breathe. My bank account was humiliating. My inbox, a graveyard of "we regret to inform you." But I still woke up early, still ran 3 miles in the mornings, still did my bodyweight circuits on the thin mat beside the bed. Because somewhere in all this mess, I refused to stop moving. That's when I saw it. A flyer, weather-streaked and flapping on the corner post near the grocery store. Dayton Fire Department now recruiting. Physical exam open enrollment. I stood there staring at it as the wind tugged at the paper like it was daring me to rip it down. My fingers itched. Firefighting. It hit me like a pulse, fast, certain, loud. The adrenaline, the grit, the need for calm under pressure. All the things I used to crave when I imagined boot camp when I trained in the barn back home. I'd rerouted to medicine, yes, but I'd never lost that fire, punishing workouts, the pursuit of control, of purpose. I tore the flyer down and folded it into my jacket. The next morning I applied. That same day I ran 6 extra miles. Just to make sure my body still remembered how to want something. The entrance exam was brutal. Timed climbs, CPR compression drills, dummy drags across concrete floors. I blistered, bruised, bled, but passed. My name made the list. Orientation started the following Monday. That Monday, I stood outside Dayton Fire Station 13 with a duffel bag slung over my shoulder and my nerves crackling in my chest like dry twigs. I wasn't wearing a lab coat or pressed blazer. Just tactical boots, utility pants, and a badge clipped to my chest. Inside, the station buzzed with new energy. A few other recruits were unpacking in the locker room, the air thick with deodorant, nervous chatter, and the echo of voices from the gym down the hall. Then I heard him. "Hey, you're the one from the CPR station, right? You beat the instructor's time." I turned to see a tall guy with a wide grin, leaning against a bench like he owned gravity. His name tag read Marcus Rivera. "That was you," he added. "With that form, I'd bet you were born for this." I blinked, startled by the comment, then surprised by how much it meant. "Thanks," I said, suddenly aware of how good it felt to be seen for something other than being too much or not enough. He tossed me a bottled water. You from around here? Kind of, I replied, unscrewing the cap. Farm town, middle of nowhere, not exactly a city girl, he smirked. Well, you landed somewhere real now. And just like that I felt it, that flicker of pride, like my lungs had more room in them. Later that afternoon, Captain Claire arrived, tall, composed, eyes sharp as glass. She didn't waste time with small talk. Some of you will wash out, she said, pacing before us like a general. Not because you're not strong, but because you're not steady. Fire doesn't care how many reps you can do. Fire respects decisions, not drama. You want to be here? Prove it. My heartbeat slowed, not in fear but in readiness. I didn't know yet what would come next, how close I'd be to losing everything again. But right then, I was exactly where I needed to be, in a room full of strangers, wearing boots that fit, with a spark in my chest that felt suspiciously like hope. The firehouse kitchen was warmer than the rest of the station, not just from the old gas stove but from the energy that lived in the room. It smelled like someone's grandma had spent the day in there, spices and grease, butter and beans. It was chili night, apparently a sacred tradition at Station 13. Marcus made the chili, and rookie penalty meant I was on cornbread duty. Not bad, he said, chewing with exaggerated thoughtfulness after his first bite. Crispy edges. Moist center. Could be a fluke. Next time you're making it, I said, tossing him a napkin. He grinned. Not a chance, I don't mess with perfection. There were 6 of us seated around the table: Marcus, Tasha, a quiet beast of a woman who handled the hoses like they were ribbons, Drew, the station's resident smartmouth with a PhD in sarcasm, Jamil, soft-spoken and lightning-fast with rescue tools, and me, the new girl, still learning where the mugs were kept and which towel wasn't for grease. Captain Claire stood near the counter, sipping black coffee and listening more than talking. That was her way. She had a stare that could cut through cement and a silence that commanded respect. People didn't chatter when Claire was around unless she allowed it, and tonight she did. Drew launched into a story about the time he'd rescued a squirrel and got scratched so badly they had to update his tetanus. I swear that thing waited until I was off balance, he said, gesturing dramatically. Little monster launched at me. Straight out of a tree like a ninja. Sounds like you're dating life, Jamil murmured. The room erupted. Even Tasha cracked a rare smile. I found myself laughing in a way I hadn't in years. Not the polite kind. The real kind that shook your chest and made your eyes water. For a moment I forgot to check myself, forgot to shrink or adjust. I just was. I caught Claire watching me. She wasn't smiling exactly, but her eyes had softened. She walked over and refilled her mug, then nodded toward my plate. Settling in. Trying to, I said. You're not trying, she replied quietly. You're doing. That hit me in a strange spot one no one back home had ever aimed for. She took another sip, then added, You've got the makings of a leader, Jenna. You keep your head down, eyes sharp, you listen before you move. I didn't know what to say. Praise like that wasn't something I was used to. It didn't feel like flattery, it felt like fact. Claire didn't waste words. Thank you, I managed. She nodded once. That was it, and somehow it meant more than any diploma ever had. Later, while loading dishes into the industrial sink, Marcus bumped me lightly with his elbow. You're officially part of the crew now. Because of my stellar cornbread? No, he said, grinning. Because you didn't flinch when Drew screamed like a toddler during the squirrel story. That's the real test. I chuckled. I feel honored. He leaned against the counter. You know, some people take years to earn Claire's respect. She watches. Measures. She told me I've got the makings of a leader. Marcus gave a low whistle. Well, damn, she doesn't even say that to herself. The truth was, I hadn't realized how badly I'd needed this. A place where people didn't look past me or through me, where I wasn't too much or not enough, just me, Jenna Holloway, the one who could lift, run, carry, think, lead. Not the daughter who disappointed, not the girl who got mocked for dreaming too loud. Here, I didn't have to explain myself. I just had to show up. And so far, showing up had been enough. It was supposed to be routine. Small kitchen fire, 3rd floor. The kind of call we almost joked about: burned popcorn, someone forgetting oil on the stove. Claire's briefing was quick: stay alert, stay sharp, but no panic. Nothing about the call felt out of the ordinary, until we got there. The smoke was already pouring from the windows like it had been waiting for us. Thick, angry, dark, the kind that didn't drift, it stuck. Claimed the air. Engine 13 on scene, Claire radioed as we jumped out. Three-story walk-up, heavy smoke, unknown occupancy. We moved fast, hose line in, search team up. I was second in the stack, right behind Marcus. He kicked in the door and heat slapped us in the face like a living thing. I'd trained for this 100 times, but training doesn't prepare you for the sound of fire. The way it crackles with hunger. On the second floor, we split off. The smoke was so dense our flashlights looked like they were cutting through soup. I scanned the hallway, heart thudding in my ears, trying not to think about how quiet it was. Too quiet. I reached the third floor unit just as Marcus's voice came through the radio. Clear on 2, moving up. I pushed forward. The floor groaned beneath my boots. My hand skimmed the wall. One breath at a time through the SCBA mask. Then I heard it, a cough, barely audible through the roar of flame but enough to stop me cold. Got someone? I shouted into the radio. Top floor, Unit 3B, Claire's voice came sharp. Jenna, that floor's unstable, get out now. But I was already in. The living room was an inferno of orange and smoke. In the far corner, half collapsed behind a flipped coffee table, was a young woman. Curled in on herself, arms over her head, coughing weakly. I didn't think. I moved. Dropped beside her, pulled her arms around my neck and lifted. She wasn't heavy, but dead weight is never easy, especially when your oxygen is running low and your gear is hot enough to blister skin through 3 layers. I dragged her toward the hall, stumbling once when a beam fell behind us with a crash that shook the floor. Jenna, Claire's voice crackled through the comms. I said get out. Coming, I gasped, voice barely audible as the smoke thinned the oxygen around me. The stairs were crumbling, literally breaking apart underfoot. I took them 2 at a time, my shoulder screaming, her body bouncing against me with every jolt. The door was 10 feet away when the floor behind us collapsed. The heat slammed into my back, fire roaring up like it was chasing us out. I burst through the front door with the last of my strength, fell hard onto the pavement with her still in my arms. Then I heard it. The building groaned and folded. The roof caved in with a deafening roar as fire exploded into the night sky. Screams echoed. Sirens screamed louder. Hands grabbed me, pulled her off me. I tried to stand and couldn't. The pain in my arms, my side, sharp, deep, wrong. She's burned. We've got burns on her arms and neck. Get her to the rig now. The world blurred. I saw Claire's face above me, pale and furious. You stupid, brave girl, she said, voice breaking. And then everything went black. I woke up in a hospital bed 2 days later, arms wrapped in gauze, tubes in my arms, the dull hum of machines around me. Nurse told me I'd saved her life. Told me the building collapsed seconds after I cleared the threshold. Told me I had second-degree burns down both arms and part of my left side, but that it could have been worse. She said I was lucky. I didn't feel lucky. I felt broken. Quiet, drained. Claire visited that night. She sat by my bed in her uniform, silent for a while. Next time, she finally said, you don't go back in alone. I nodded. Then she added, but you made the call. The right one. I turned my head slowly. She okay? She's alive because of you. That was the first time I cried. Not for the pain, not even for the fear, but because, for once, no one could say I wasn't enough. I didn't have a title. I didn't have a paycheck, but I had that. I was enough. The envelope was cream-colored, heavy and handwritten. Jenna Holloway in my brother's neat, familiar script. I opened it slowly, unsure if it would hold joy or obligation. You are cordially invited to the wedding of Caleb Holloway and Ava Jennings. The date was in 3 weeks. No mention of mom and dad. No +1. Just my name, my address. No expectations, just an invitation. I sat with it for a while. Let it sit on my desk beside my bandage ointment and burn cream. Part of me wanted to crumple it, to avoid the risk of walking back into a room filled with people who still saw me as the girl who failed, at the military, at medicine, at whatever they thought I'd never quite become. But Caleb, he'd always been different. The last time we spoke was a few days after I got out of the hospital. He'd called unexpectedly, said he'd heard what happened, that he was proud of me, that he didn't know the full story but he didn't need to. He'd meant it. I heard it in his voice, so I circled the date, and I RSVP'd yes. The Garden Hall in downtown Cincinnati was the kind of place I never imagined seeing my little brother get married. White columns, fairy lights woven through ivy-covered trellises. Everything smelled like roses and champagne. I stood just outside the reception entrance, my palms clammy, adjusting the sleeves of my deep blue dress for the 10th time. The fabric was soft but heavy, hiding the thin, pink lines that still spidered across both arms like a map of survival. I could have worn short sleeves. I could have shown the scars. But I wasn't ready, not for them, not yet. I walked in slowly, heart thudding like I was stepping onto a stage. No one noticed me at first. Everyone was laughing, drinking, leaning into one another with that soft warmth that weddings bring. And then I saw him, Caleb. Standing at the edge of the dance floor in a charcoal suit, hair swept back, a glass in hand. He looked older than I remembered. Happier too, he turned and spotted me, his face lit up. Jenna, he crossed the room in seconds and wrapped me in the kind of hug that told me everything I needed to know. He didn't care about the dress, or the time apart, or the fact that I hadn't written back to his Christmas card last year. You made it, he said into my shoulder. Wouldn't miss it, I murmured. Back, eyes shining. How are you? I smiled faintly. Healing. Before he could say more, I reached into my small purse and pulled out a box. Inside was an antique pocket watch with a brushed silver case. On the back, I'd had it engraved, "Time reminds us who we are." He read it twice, then looked at me. "This was Granddad S," he said softly. "I had it restored." Caleb blinked a few times. "Thank you." I figured, with everything changing, it'd be good to carry something that keeps time honest. He didn't say anything, just pulled me into another hug and held on tight. From across the room, I saw Mom watching. Her lips parted like she wanted to speak, but then she turned back to her plate and said something to Dad. He didn't even look at me. Fine, let them sit in silence. I was here for Caleb, that was enough. The room buzzed with speeches and laughter, clinking glasses and gentle applause. Ava was radiant, gold satin and wild curls, the kind of bride you couldn't look away from. She smiled at me once, a little unsure but kind. I nodded, grateful. I stayed close to the corner most of the evening, sipping cider and breathing in the soft, floral air, letting myself exist without performing. I smiled when spoken to. Danced once when Tasha from the station surprised me by showing up as a guest of Ava's cousin. The world felt smaller in that moment. Warmer somehow. Still, under the long sleeves and polite smiles, I could feel my nerves coiling. I didn't know how the night would unfold, but I knew the odds of being invisible were slim. Especially with my father seated 2 tables away and a microphone waiting for the toasts. I should have known he wouldn't resist the microphone. The speeches had started flowing after dessert, sweet, predictable, and laced with just enough alcohol to loosen everyone's filters. Ava's maid of honor gave a teary toast about friendship and fate. Caleb's best man told a mildly inappropriate story that had Ava's mother covering her face with both hands and laughing anyway. Then came the moment I dreaded the most. The DJ's voice cut in. And now, a few words from the father of the groom, Rick Holloway. The name landed like a weight in my chest. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. I just tightened my grip around my glass and kept my smile glued on like armor. My father walked up to the mic with that easy saunter he reserved for public moments. The confident, corn-fed Ohio charm that people mistook for warmth. He raised his champagne flute with a grin. "Well," he began, "I gotta say, this day came a lot sooner than I expected. My boy Caleb married, to a woman who clearly sees something in him I missed during the teenage years." The crowd laughed gently. My brother smiled sheepishly, arm wrapped around Ava's waist. Rick continued. "I always knew Caleb would land on his feet. He's been steady since the day he learned to walk. Always had a head on his shoulders, our golden boy." There was a cheer, another round of laughter. "And now he's married to a woman with just as much sense as beauty. Ava, welcome to the family. You're the smartest one of us all for saying yes to this guy." Ava beamed, cheeks flushed with wine and happiness. I thought maybe he would stop there. But he didn't. "And then of course," he said, pausing for dramatic effect, "there's our Jenna." My heart stopped. He turned, gesturing toward my table as if I were just another guest to wave at. His smile widened. "Still figuring out what to do with herself, but hey, there's no shame in that. Some folks find their way early, others take the scenic route." A ripple of laughter passed through the room. Not cruel, not overt, but enough. Enough to split something open inside me. I felt the heat rise in my neck first. Then my hands, a burn that had nothing to do with flames. I forced a small smile, nodding once as if I were in on the joke. I was, he chuckled, pleased with himself, and raised his glass. "To Caleb and Ava, may your journey be straighter than your sister S." A louder burst of laughter this time. Someone actually clapped. My mother gave a soft, nervous chuckle. The kind that said I wish he hadn't said that, but also let's not make a fuss. I stared at my plate, my knife, my napkin. Anything but the people now glancing toward me with varying degrees of pity, discomfort, or detached amusement. Claire's voice echoed in my mind, "You've got the makings of a leader." And yet here I was silent, small. My dress suddenly felt like a costume, the sleeves like bandages. I blinked quickly, refusing to let the tears form. Not here, not now. I reminded myself of what I'd survived, of the lives I'd touched, of the fire I'd walked through, both literal and not. And still his words echoed louder than I wanted them to, still figuring it out, as if all I'd done amounted to floundering, as if being brave on your own time, in your own way, didn't count unless he approved. I took a slow sip of my drink and let the burn ground me. Somewhere in the back of the hall, the band started setting up again. I hoped the music would drown out the weight of my father's words, but I knew they'd linger, long after the laughter faded. I was still at the edge of the garden hall, half-shadowed under a strand of string lights, trying to make my drink last longer than it needed to, when I felt a gentle hand on my arm. "Jenna," I turned, expecting maybe one of Caleb's college friends, or a distant cousin trying to fill the awkward air Dad had left behind. But it was Ava. The bride herself, glowing, radiant, every inch the picture of poise and grace, except now her eyes were glassy, and her lips trembled just enough to break that flawless exterior. "Ava," I said, standing straighter, bracing for I don't even know what. A polite apology for her new father-in-law's tasteless joke, a pity hug, but what she said next made my breath catch. "You're the one who pulled my sister out of that apartment fire." The music, the chatter, the clink of glasses, they all faded into a dull buzz behind us. I blinked. "What? My sister Lena, she was the one you saved." Her voice cracked, the tears now real, trailing down her cheeks. "She called me from the hospital that night, said she didn't remember your face, just your voice. Said an angel in the smoke told her she was going to be okay. Said you carried her out when the whole place was falling down." I couldn't move. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. "She didn't know your name, she never saw your face through the mask, but she described you." Ava swallowed, pressing her fingers to her lips like the words were too much. "And when she saw you here tonight, she nearly collapsed. She called me from the bathroom, told me, Ava, it's her, it's her." Something cracked inside me, something I hadn't even known was holding tension. I whispered, "I didn't even know who she was, I couldn't leave her." Ava didn't answer. She just stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. No hesitation. No pity. Just a hug that said thank you in 100 silent ways. I stood frozen for a second, then let myself return it. Her satin gown cool against my cheek, her perfume sweet and unfamiliar. My arms were stiff from the healing burns, but I didn't care. We stood there like that between the ferns and fairy lights, two women bound not by family or tradition, but by fire and survival. "She wanted to come out and say it herself," Ava said as she pulled back, wiping her eyes, "but she's still shaking. She's sitting with my cousin, trying to catch her breath." I nodded slowly. "Tell her she didn't need to say anything, I was just doing my job." Ava gave me a soft, almost knowing smile. "Some jobs change lives, whether you meant to or not, you changed hers." I looked down, suddenly overwhelmed. "I didn't think anyone ever knew." "She did," Ava whispered. "And now I do. And now they will too." Before I could ask what she meant, Ava gave my hands a squeeze and stepped back, her eyes still shining. "I'll be right back," she said. "Don't go anywhere." I watched her disappear into the crowd, her veil catching the light, her purpose as clear as her steps. My heart was pounding again, but for the first time that night, it wasn't from shame. It was something else, something like anticipation. Around me, the music dipped lower, the DJ announcing a small break before the next dance set. Glasses clinked. Laughter resumed. But somewhere in the distance, something was shifting, something big. I could feel it rising like smoke before a flame. It started with feedback. A sudden high-pitched squeal from the mic on the far side of the reception hall that made every guest flinch and look up from their plates. The band paused mid-tune. Conversations trailed off. Glasses clinked back to the tables. Then Ava appeared at the mic. Still glowing, still every inch the graceful bride, but now with a calmness that pulled the air tight around her. "Sorry," she said with a sheepish smile, tapping the mic gently. "I know it's not normal for the bride to interrupt her own reception." A few chuckles flickered across the crowd. "But before we go any further tonight, there's something you all need to see." She looked toward the back of the room and gave a single nod. The string lights dimmed. The band's instruments fell quiet. On the far wall, a projector flickered to life. The white linen screen, until now just part of the decor, suddenly lit up with grainy news footage. It took a few seconds for the room to understand what we were watching. WDTN Channel 2. Residential fire, Dayton, Ohio. The camera footage was shaky, taken from across the street. Smoke poured from a brick apartment building, flames licking out from shattered windows. Sirens wailed in the background, people screamed. Firefighters moved. Then the image steadied. And there I was, dragging a woman, Lena, through the collapsing doorway, my helmet tilted back, my gear scorched. Arms burned raw and skin visible through torn sleeves. My face was blackened with soot, but my eyes were visible. Wide, focused, alive. I was limping, struggling, barely holding myself upright. And still, I didn't let her go. Just as the medics reached me in the frame, I collapsed. Footage froze right there, my body on the ground, curled protectively around the woman I just carried out. A sound moved through the room. A collective gasp. A breath held too long. I didn't dare look around. I kept my eyes on the screen, even though I knew the image by heart. I'd replayed that moment 100 times in my mind, but not like this. Not with everyone watching. Not with the lights dimmed and the truth blazing brighter than the chandelier above us. Ava stepped forward again, her voice trembling now. The woman in that video is my sister, Lena. She wouldn't be here today, she wouldn't be alive if it weren't for someone in this very room. She paused, her eyes searching. Jenna, she said softly. Jenna Holloway saved her life. All heads turned. Suddenly, I was no longer invisible. I felt the weight of every eye in that hall. And then I heard it, clink. The unmistakable sound of glass hitting tile. I turned. My father was standing. His champagne flute had slipped from his hand and shattered at his feet. He didn't bend to pick it up. He was staring at the screen, mouth parted, shoulders stiff. Not angry, not amused, just stunned. For the first time in my life, I watched Rick Holloway rendered completely speechless. The kind of silence that says I've been wrong. The kind that doesn't ask for forgiveness. Only acknowledgement. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I let the truth speak for me. Let the smoke and flame tell the story I'd never dared to. And in that moment, under the soft flicker of the projector, surrounded by stunned silence, I didn't feel small. I felt seen. The lights stayed dim. The image on the projector still hovered, frozen in time, me on the ground, burned and broken but victorious. The clatter of my father's shattered glass was long gone, but its echo still lived in the silence. Rick Holloway didn't move for a long time. He stood there, still as stone, hands stiff at his sides, jaw tight enough to crack. I watched the war unfold in his face, confusion bleeding into recognition, pride warring with shame. His voice broke on the first word, he tried again. I had no idea. A few guests shifted in their seats. Others watched him like spectators at a reckoning. He took one slow breath, then looked straight at me. That was you. I didn't blink, didn't drop my gaze. It always was, I said calmly, voice low but clear. You just stopped looking. I could feel every heartbeat in my chest, but I didn't let them see that. Not now. He blinked as if the words had hit harder than he expected. The room was dead quiet. Even the DJ had the sense not to play anything. My father stepped around his table, shoulders stiff with the weight of his own undoing. He crossed the room slowly, each footfall quiet against the polished floor. He stopped just a few feet in front of me. His eyes searched mine, for what I didn't know, maybe for the daughter he thought had disappeared, maybe for the one he now realized had never gone anywhere. His voice dropped to a whisper. I'm proud of you, Jenna. I felt my jaw tight, not in resistance but in restraint. He reached out, slow like he was afraid I'd flinch, and placed a single hand on my shoulder. His fingers trembled. I'm sorry, he said. I wasn't proud of you before, I should have been. The words didn't come easily. That was clear, they cost him something. And still I could see in his face that they were real. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Not a full forgiveness, not yet, but a first step, a necessary one. I nodded once. Not cold, not warm, just enough. From behind us someone clapped, then another. And then the whole hall, not a standing ovation, not a performance, just quiet, sustained applause. The kind that wraps around you like a blanket. Kind that says, we see you now, all of you. Claire was in the back, leaning against the wall with arms crossed, a rare smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. Marcus raised his glass toward me. Caleb, already standing beside Ava, looked at me like I'd just rewritten the whole story they grew up believing. I turned back to my father. He was still standing there, his hand falling back to his side. He looked older now, smaller somehow, but honest. I never meant to, he began. I know, I cut in gently. But meaning and doing aren't the same thing. He nodded. And for once, he didn't argue, he just listened. And that, more than anything, was what I'd been waiting for. The night had settled in soft and slow, wrapping the garden in a hush broken only by the rustle of ivy and the hum of far-off laughter from inside the hall. Most of the guests had returned to their dancing and dessert. The storm had passed, leaving only stillness in its wake. I sat alone on a stone bench near the edge of the garden. A string of warm lights hung low above me, swaying in the breeze. The weight I'd carried for years of proving, of performing, of bracing for his next jab had cracked under the pressure of truth. But pieces still clung to me, stubborn like old scars. I heard his footsteps before I saw him. Rick approached slowly, hands in his pockets like a man unsure of his welcome. He looked at me, then the space beside me on the bench, and asked quietly, "Mind if I sit?" I hesitated, then gave a small nod. He lowered himself onto the bench, exhaling with a soft grunt. For a long stretch, neither of us spoke. It was the first time in years that silence between us didn't feel like punishment. "You were always tougher than me," he said finally, eyes fixed ahead on nothing in particular. I didn't answer. I wasn't sure if it was a compliment or a confession. I used to think strength was about being the loudest, the hardest, the one who never changed his mind. He paused. Turns out strength looks more like dragging someone out of a burning building with your own arms on fire. I let out a small breath, half a laugh, half a release. I didn't do it for recognition. "I know," he said. "That's what makes it hit even harder." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, then looked over at me. "You did what I never could, Jenna. You stood for something. You didn't wait for permission. You didn't fold when it got hard." His voice tightened. "And you did it without needing anyone to pat you on the back." He looked down, then back up. "I should have been there from the beginning. You deserved better from me." I swallowed hard. "You made me think that if I wasn't exactly who you wanted, I wasn't anything." He closed his eyes for a second. "I know." Another pause. The night air was cool against my skin, but my heart felt warmer than it had in years. He sat up straighter. "I can't undo what I did or what I didn't do. But if you'll let me, I want to try to show up better, not with lectures, just with presence." I turned to him fully now. For the first time in years, I looked at him not as my judge, but as a man who'd finally started to see what he'd missed. "Start by listening," I said softly. "And don't stop." He nodded. And there, beneath the twinkling lights and the ghost of old wounds, something between us shifted. Not fixed, not perfect, but mending. 1 year later, I stand beneath a blistering summer sun, my boots planted firm in the gravel yard outside Station 13. A dozen recruits form a crooked line in front of me, sweating, nervous, trying not to drop their rescue dummies or show they're out of breath. I watch their posture, how they carry their weight, whether they look straight ahead or steal glances to see if I'm watching. I always am. "Again," I call. No panic in the run, and no dragging like it's a sack of potatoes. "That's a human life you're carrying, respect it." They scramble back to the starting line. One of the younger girls, Mel, passes me with wide eyes and breathless awe. She whispers, "Ma'am, I saw the footage of what you did. That fire in Dayton." I smile at her, not brushing it off the way I once might have. "Then you know why I don't accept excuses." My arms are bare today. It took me a long time to stop hiding them. The scars have faded from red to rose gold, curling across my skin like branches in frost. Some people still glance at them, but I no longer flinch when they do. They're not ugly, they're proof. After drills, I rinse off and change into jeans and a soft t-shirt before the short drive back to Holloway Farm. I make the trip once a month now. It's not obligation anymore, it's choice. Dad always meets me at the end of the gravel drive, pretending not to wait, but I know he times it. He waves when he sees me, still in his work shirt even though the farm's quieter now. Mom's usually inside preparing lunch, leaving him to make the first move. This time, there's someone new at the house, one of his old friends from the co-op, standing beside the truck. When I walk up, Dad's face lights up with a smile that reaches all the way to his eyes. He turns to his friend and claps a hand on my shoulder. "This here's my daughter, Jenna, the hero I've been telling you about." He says it easily now. No sarcasm, no discomfort, just pride. I nod, offer a handshake, and take the compliment without shrinking. I've learned how. Later, while sitting on the porch with iced tea and the quiet hum of cicadas, I think about the long road between shame and self-worth. I know now that real value isn't handed to you by people who never tried to understand you. It's earned in fire, in silence, in the refusal to give up even when no one's watching. And most of all, it's something you decide for yourself. Every single day.